let's go back in time a little bit and start at the beginning with the Broadway production.
Yes. Well, that was 1957, and Irv Kostal, a wonderful orchestrator, and myself did the original on Broadway, and it was wonderful to do because of Leonard Bernstein. It wasn't just the average score. It was something we knew was something different and something wonderful. Lenny used to send out for sandwiches, so it became a party. We would sit down and we'd talk about the score. We'd eat, we'd laugh, we'd have a ball, and it really was not work at all. We just looked forward to it as being a wonderful experience. It was fun to do, and I must say that the Broadway show Irv and I did in about 3 weeks, and that was a lot of music for 3 weeks. Considering that both of Irv and I were doing our Broadway chores. I was doing the Milton Berle show, and Irv was doing Show of Shows with Gary Moore. And so we had our hands filled at that point. Then you added this to it, and it could have been chaotic, and I guess it was chaotic. We were just too young and stupid not to know that it was chaotic.
So you had television and Broadway all going at the same time?
All going at the same time, yeah. Which I would not advise for any young arranger. But there were certain limitations that Irv and I had on that show. For example, we wanted to use a lot of different woodwind colors, but Lenny wanted a friend of his to play the bassoon, and he only played the bassoon. And so that made our 5 woodwinds drop to 4 woodwinds, really. And we had the chore of, within the 4 woodwinds, of using piccolo, flute, clarinet, bass saxophone, anything you wanted within those 4 players. But what we didn't understand was that it took time to change from instrument to instrument. And by the time the instrument players would wet their reed and put their old instrument down and take the new one, it took a lot of figuring, which of course we worked out in the theater. In later years, when we did the film, that was a whole different story. We had 16 instruments, we had 16 players, and so that was different.
Just in the woodwinds?
Just in the woodwinds.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many in the pit, and then how many when you recorded for the film?
In the pit in New York, I think was about 28, 29 players. But doing the movie, we used anything that we wanted. And I guess we must have ended up using about 80, 85 players easily. And I know that, for example, where we had used 1 xylophone in the pit, we said, gee, we can use 4 xylophones. So we used 4 xylophones, any luxury you wanted.
What number do you think benefited the most when you got to go from the size of the band in the pit to the size in the recording studio for the film?
Well, actually, the whole score, really. There wasn't one number. Of course, the mambo was one that became quite popular, and we enjoyed doing that very, very much for both the Broadway show and for the film. But there's a funny story associated with the transition from the Broadway show to the film. Irv Kostal said, you know, why don't we get the jump on it? Why don't we sit down here in New York and figure they'll give us anything we want and write some of the stuff? And I said, gee, I don't know whether we can do that. He said, of course we can. So Irv and I sat down and did quite a few of the routines here in New York. And when we went to LA, we went to the recording studios, and the rumor was that, gee, these two guys came in from New York only a few days ago, and look at the raft of stuff. They are terrific. And we became legends out there immediately doing the arrangements.
Because they thought you were so fast.
Yes, they thought we were terrific. And I guess we were terrific.
Yeah. What sort of shape was the score in when my father presented it to you and
Yes.
Irv?
When Lenny presented the score to us, he knew pretty much what he would like. We all made suggestions, but he knew that there was a certain sound that he wanted, and we would just try to, and we would talk about it. I've worked with composers, many composers in the theater, who literally don't know what a lead sheet is. They cannot make one. But Lenny gave us a pretty good idea and a good sketch of what he wanted. We would obviously talk about things and change things and add things, for which he was grateful. Every measure, every bar, we would sort of tinker with, and it was an absolute joy. We had pre-orchestration meetings where Lenny would sit down and play the stuff for us. We talk about it. Then Irv would go to our various offices and do what we spoke about, come back for a post-orchestration meeting, and Lenny would say either one of two things. Either, gee, why did you guys do that? Or, hey, not too bad. And I would wait for the hey, not too bad, because that really meant a lot to us.
There was some like sort of vaudeville figure that you knew about that you told my father about, and he was so grateful, but I can't remember what song it was. Do you know what I'm talking about? There was some little thing that you knew what to put in. And
well, we call it a fill. After a phrase, you have a certain amount of beats that have to be filled. And as orchestrators, Irv and I would just think of something and put it in. Lenny would hear the fills and he'd say, gee, how did you guys think of that? And I said to myself, here's somebody who wrote the Cool Fugue, which was a masterpiece. How Lenny wrote that fugue was just astounding. And here he's asking Irv and I how to put in a little 2-bar or a 3-bar, 3-note fill. And we used to laugh and shake our heads and said, it's just amazing that somebody so talented thought that we were doing something talented, and all we were doing was something that was so natural to anybody, just putting a little fill in. But to Lenny, that was just different.
Now tell a little bit about how it was when you and Irv arrived in LA and where you were staying and the work conditions.
Yes, well, Irv and I stayed at a little hotel on Wilshire, had a swimming pool, and when Irv and I saw the swimming pool, we said, hey, this is pretty good. We can work and then take a swim. And I said, we can do better than that. Let's set up a bridge table at the pool, and we'll work right at poolside. And so we did. We set up a table at the pool. We sat down, and Irv loved to score in ink, so I was scoring in ink also. And we sat down by the pool and began the work. And I said, hey, how about a dip, Irv? And he said, yeah, great. So we got up, jumped in the pool, didn't secure our pages on the table, The wind came along, blew everything into the pool, which became black with ink, and we decided we should not go Hollywood. We went back to our room upstairs, and that was that.
It's my favorite story.
Yes.
I love it. The New York guys making the most of Hollywood out by the pool. And
Exactly.
very funny.
But I hated ink, just for what you said, because I would change my mind after I put something down. I say, no, I think it could be this or that, and but it was there in ink,
Right.
and so
Too late.
you say the heck with it, leave it,
Yeah.
which you should not do. But I think the story that I always tell about Irv, because we worked in ink, his fountain pen, you had to fill it through the front. You like drop the ink into the fountain pen. That's way before anybody remembers all that, but there were fountain pens where you had to drop the ink in. And Irv would drop the ink in his pen and write, and he'd see me staring at my score pad, not putting anything down. He'd take his pen and flick it towards my score pad. Ink would fly out onto my score pad, and he'd say, put some stems on that. So that was Irv Kostal.
That's funny.
There was a scene once when Jerry Robbins, who was sort of famous for being difficult, and Lenny also, you know, we were doing Officer Krupke, and it went Officer Krupke, da 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 da, bum bum. There were two bum-boms in it, and Jerry. But Lenny had written it as with 4 bum-bums. Bum-bum, bum-bum. Jerry heard it and said, I only want 2. So Lenny said, no, it's got to be 4. So they argued back and forth about whether it should be 2 or 4 bum-bums. And finally Lenny got exasperated, walked off the stage, up the aisle, and I ran after him and said, Lenny, it's only 2 bum-bums. Why are you making a scene of it? He said, no, it's got to be 4. Anyhow, Jerry won. We took out the 2 bum-bums. And my favorite story is that I still have 2 bum-bums ready to be used. If anybody wants to buy them, I've got them. And I'll be happy to send them to you very, very reasonably. I was just thinking, as we're speaking, that when I met Lenny, I was 12 and he was 13. There was only 5 months difference between Lenny and myself. I used to go over to Lenny's house, which was your house, really, on Pleasanton Street, I guess it was, and used to love being there and being with Lenny, and we both learned from each other as the years went on. But Lenny was the teacher, I was the student, and that's a great combination when you have a teacher like Leonard Bernstein and a student like myself who was like a sponge waiting to hear everything that Lenny would say so I could learn something. And we had that going for 70 years, which is a long time.